will we be paying for stuff? Well, maybe for some use cases, we won't. Maybe the AI will be doing that for us.
Hello, and welcome to Settling Up with Go Cardless.
But at the end of the day, it's the customer that is going to use it. In order for any kind of payment ecosystem to work, it needs to have trust. Apple did the world a great service when they actually first deployed Touch ID. Now biometrics is a thing. Transparency, control, consistency, I think are the key to a great customer experience.
Hello, and welcome to Settling Up with Go Cardless, where we settle the score with leaders in payments, getting their honest opinions with hot takes and no chargebacks. Today, I'm joined by Neira Jones. Neira, welcome to the podcast. Delighted to have you with us. Tell us a bit more about yourself and your background.
Well, thank you so much, Ellie. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And first of all, I have to say, I absolutely love the tagline of no chargebacks. I mean, always a very interesting issue in payments in general. And if only the world was that straightforward. So looking forward to our discussion. Well, what can I tell you about me? Well, I'm basically a payments nerd. I've been in financial services for a very long time. I started my career many moons ago as a programmer, actually.
Oh, really?
As a programmer working mostly in retail banking. And after a couple of decades, I discovered payments. I was in payments before payments were actually interesting, when they were actually boring. Now everybody seems to be talking about them. So I've been in payments for a long while. I've worked for many organizations, including banks, technology companies, and I now work as an advisor, as a non-executive director, and I'm also an author and a speaker and a trainer. So in a nutshell, basically, I'm a payments nerd.
Yeah, well, we like payments nerds on this podcast, so we really appreciate you coming on, and we're definitely going to pick your brains in terms of your roles there, your various roles. Great to have you with us, Neira.
Lovely to be here.
Today, Neira joins us so that we can delve into her experience as an educator and speaker to bust some myths when it comes to the world of financial services, and to get her thoughts on the payments trends and developments that are changing the landscape today. So we're going to come on to our game now of approved, pending, declined. It's a nice little icebreaker before we get into some of the heavier, weightier topics. So I'm going to give you a series of industry terms or concepts, and you have to tell me if it's one of the three of the following. So it's approved, it's got the green light, you think it's a great idea, full steam ahead. Maybe you think it's pending, so it's not quite there yet, it's got the amber light, maybe it needs a few tweaks. Or declined, you think it's a terrible idea, stop it immediately, it's got the red light. So the first thing I'm going to throw your way is agentic commerce, approved, pending, or declined.
Oh, I think this one perhaps is pending.
Okay.
I mean, undeniably, this summer of 2025, has been the summer of agentic payments, hasn't it?
It has.
I mean, anybody is doing something about it. I mean, up to yesterday, suddenly we've got the Adyen doing stuff as well. And before that, Stripe and Amazon and Visa and MasterCard. So they're all at it. So why is it pending? Well, essentially, agentic commerce is actually very, very interesting as a technology. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing is not a technology matter. It's actually a behavioral and a trust matter. So pending, because in order for this to work smoothly as we expected, and for people in general and organization to adopt it, we need to have trust. Mm-hmm. And trust means governance. And I think governance, as it should be, as we're used to it in traditional payments ecosystems, is not yet there for agentic commerce. But I think it will be there.
Okay. I like that. That's a really nuanced answer. So the next term I have for you. So open banking as a term, what do you think? Is it approved, pending, or declined?
If you mean open banking as a term and as a description, I would say declined. And the reason I would say declined is because open banking as a term is actually not helpful. So when we came in with our big boots in 2018 with PSD2, we're going to do open banking. Although it didn't strictly say that. What it did say is we're going to open up access to promote innovation and competition by essentially forcing incumbents to give access to data so that new business models and new services could actually be developed. And that's all very commendable. So that gets a thumbs up. So, and the reverse of the coin is that for all those new entrants and third parties that would have access to the data, which were previously unregulated under the previous directive, became regulated. So that makes sense. And trying to implement security around it through strong customer authentication and various other bits and pieces such as secure communications and standard API. So all very commendable.
Yeah.
But it all comes down again, and probably we're going to discuss that throughout our chat today. It depends on consumer perception. Because as a consumer, as an individual who doesn't know anything about payments, you just pay for stuff. So as a consumer, you're used to cards, certainly in the Western world. So you're used to cards and you're used to, using your banking app and whatever. And we, in the payments industry, we come in with our big boots and we say open banking. As a layman, the two terms, open and banking, don't gel together. It's just like, I don't want my banking to be open because I want to remain in control. Now, they don't necessarily understand that with open banking, you actually remain in control because you will never give access without your express consent, and you can withdraw that consent and that permission at any time you so wish. But the marketing of it, so to speak, and the PR of open banking is actually not helpful for the general population at large. If you look at the Australian market, for example, they don't call it open banking. What they actually call it is consumer data right, which is actually much more helpful because it says, what it actually does. So open banking as a concept, very commendable.
Yeah.
It could be a game changer. Will it be? Well, it will rely on consumer adoption, but it will rely on all stakeholders having something in return for the services that they're actually providing.
What about then embedded finance? Approved, pending, or declined?
That's a difficult one. And again, I'm sitting on the fence here. So it's between approved and pending.
Okay.
Definitely not declined, because the concept of embedding financial services in general into non-financial applications is actually really good for the user and for merchants, because being able to offer those services from essentially regulated entities is actually a good thing because it makes it much simpler. In terms of the pending element, for me, again, I can always come back to that, it's the governance aspect. I don't think we have actually thought about all of the inherent risks around governance associated with embedded finance. But so perhaps more on the approved side than on the pending side, but still work to do.
Okay, I like that answer. Finally then, open banking as the future of payments in the UK. Approved, pending, or declined?
I would say definitely not declined. And I would say pending, depending on what happens with the regulators and the development of commercial models, which is happening right now. So I'll give you another answer maybe in Q1 next year.
Yeah, okay, so watch this space then.
Yes.
Okay, so now a few more personal ones for you so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
First of all, people leaving voicemails, approved, pending, or declined?
I would say approved.
Yeah.
For me, because I like to hear people's voices, and that doesn't happen very often actually, because when somebody calls me and misses me, generally I don't very often get a voicemail apart from, my car dealer. And I mostly get a WhatsApp message, which is probably a much quicker thing.
Yeah.
So I would say approved. I like it.
Okay. You like the sound of people's voices.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, then getting to the airport as late as possible. Approved, pending, or declined?
Oh, definitely approved. I'm one of those late travelers that packs at the last minute.
Okay, and you're getting to the airport quite last minute as well, cutting it fine.
Oh, yes.
But if it works for you,
Yeah. I haven't missed a flight as yet. So
Okay, well, that's good.
I'm sure it'll happen at some point.
What about surprise birthday parties? Approved, pending, or declined?
Oh, totally approved. I adore surprises.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
completely gullible when it comes to surprises.
So it could all be getting organised behind your back and you'd have no idea.
And I'd have no idea whatsoever.
Okay. Well, for friends and family watching then, they can throw you a surprise party anytime.
And they have done many times.
Oh, have they?
And I was surprised every time.
Finally, spicy food. Approved, pending, or declined?
Most definitely approved.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any particular cuisine that you like when it comes to spiciness and flavours?
No, I'm French, so basically, as you might know, I eat anything.
Living up to the stereotype then.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for playing Approved, Pending, Declined, Neira.
Most welcome.
So, Neira, you've been working in the fintech space for a while now, as we mentioned in the introduction. So I'm interested to know what initially piqued your interest in financial services and then payments. So what lit that initial spark, would you say?
Oh, that was a very long time ago. So, when I came out of university and I actually got a master's in computer science, so I became a programmer, and my first job was working for a bank. Mm-hmm. So, and I worked for a bank as a programmer, and it was really, really interesting because obviously I used banks before, but now I was getting to actually write the systems that made the bank work. So technically, that was a technical challenge for me, and that's what actually interested me. So that's what piqued my interest first, and that's how I came into financial services. And I remained in retail banking for a very long time on the technical side, so on the IT side. And then worked for technology companies such as Oracle, so more having financial services clients as opposed to being one of them myself. So on the technology side again, technology interested me. Yeah. I love technology, and that's what piqued my interest first, and that was financial services. Then throughout my career, I got exposed to payments, although I didn't know it was called payments at the time, because I was managing a number of programs, including the insourcing to in-house infrastructure of credit and debit cards. So to me, being used to banking per se, so banking, lending, bank accounts, underwriting, risk for mortgages, and so on and so forth. And suddenly I've got this insourcing of an infrastructure, which is debit and credit card, which was interesting enough. But when you're in a change program, you don't necessarily get to appreciate what the business is actually about. So I realize now that what I was actually doing is working for the bank as an issuer, although I didn't know the term issuer then. But it was interesting enough for me to lodge it in the back of my mind to say, this is something I need to investigate further, because that's not banking, it's something different. Mm-hmm. And now I know it's payments, and I eventually got into payments to understand what all those things were about. And this is where I've been for a very long time, and I learn every day.
Well, it's interesting that you say you learn every day, because you've gone from kind of working, I suppose, as a programmer and getting behind the scenes, if you like, of the ecosystem and how it all works, to then writing and having published 3 books, and now you're working on a 4th book. And in those books, there's a real common theme, which is like you kind of take a closer look at the payments landscape, and you also demystify it. So what led you to start writing these books then in the first place?
Oh, that's actually a really long story. I actually never wanted to write a book, let alone three. But what I wanted to do with the early discussion as far back as 2014 is when I started delivering courses on payments. And that really stemmed from the fact that a client of mine was actually a fintech startup. And they said to me, would you come and do a workshop for all of us? There were about 40 of them to talk about payments so that everyone sort of appreciates the landscape. So I said, yeah, sure, I could do that. So I developed a one-day workshop, payments 101 or fundamentals, whatever you want to call it. And I delivered it and they absolutely loved it. And then I happened to discuss this with another client of mine, setting up an association, and essentially I said, well, if you want to disseminate knowledge, perhaps you should offer training. And I've got just the thing, because I've just developed this workshop, so I could deliver the training for you. And this is how it started. So I started delivering training back then, 2014. Of course, the course was a one-day workshop way back in 2014. The course now is a two-day, very intensive two-day course on payments. This is how much the industry has evolved. And each time I deliver it, I actually have to update it. Not the fundamentals, because the fundamentals remain the same, but what's happening in the industry, the news that we should be looking at, how the regulations are evolving. So, one day I remember it very well. It was June 2013. So prior to June 2023. And prior to this, I have a mentor in the industry. His name is Roger Alexander, and I'm eternally grateful to him for being such a fabulous mentor. And Roger kept saying to me over the years, Neira, you should write a book. And I kept saying to him, Roger, I don't have time to write a book. I'm far too busy. And he would be relentless about it, about writing this book. And one day in June 2023, at the beginning of June 2023, I was about to deliver a course, two-day course, and I was preparing the delegate notes. So by the time I finished updating the delegate notes, there were 150 pages. And I suddenly looked at the notes and I said, well, actually, I could probably write a book because I've got a lot of content on this course. So I started researching how to write a book and what do you do. And all my research came down to a number of things, including you need to have an agent. So it's like, no way, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to have an agent. So you need to find a publisher. So I drew a short list of 3, Routledge, Bloomsbury Business, and Macmillan Business, which were a new imprint at the time. So how do you approach them? You can't, they need agents. I said, no, surely you can approach them. So I do a bit more research, then find the specific editors for all those publishers, because I wanted an international publisher. Preferably I wanted a British publisher that is also international.
Yeah.
So Routledge was actually my first choice because I'm writing a business book. So, and then, how do you go about writing a proposal? So I do the research, I write the proposal, 25 pages later. I'm quite happy with what I've written, and I already had written a first chapter of the book. So I sent it to all 3. And within 24 hours, actually, Routledge replied. And they actually said, oh, very interesting. Can you have a chat? So we did. So I got a contract within a week. And the rest is history. So when I told them I wanted to write a second book and a third book, I wrote a proposal again, and I got a contract, and here we are. So my first book was published in March of 2023. I did a book launch in Berlin, and I did another book launch in Berlin this year for my second and third books. So,
congratulations.
Thank you. So that's Understanding Payments, Beyond Payments, and the A to Z of Payments. You mentioned earlier on that I've started writing a fourth book, and that would be called I'm not sure about the title yet, but it will be either Payments Unbound or Payments Unleashed.
Well, we really look forward to that. And when you're writing these books, as the title suggests, you're trying to, I guess, get through some of the complexity and some of the jargon, right? So what are some of the issues that you see in payments that you kind of wanted your books to kind of directly talk to?
Well, apart from Roger badgering me to write a book for so many years, what I have found is when I came into payments, I fell into payments by accident, there was nothing around. So I would ask, colleagues, what do you do? What do you read? And they said, well, there's this couple of books, Payment Systems in the US or Anatomy of a Swipe, which are very well-known books, but they were niche in their respect, one on US payments, one on card payments. But as far as understanding the whole of the payments ecosystem simply, and there is a lot of jargon in payments, as you know, it was quite difficult. So basically, I learned on the job. And I did ask all the questions myself back then in 2008. Well, how do you do this? How does this work? And you rely on talking to people who actually know. And so I became a bit more experienced in payments, and that suddenly people are actually asking me, when you deliver courses, where do you go? What do you read? I say, well, read a lot. And are there any books? Yeah, there's these two, but there's not much around to explain the whole thing. So come and attend my course and you'll learn about payments. And it's essentially because the payments industry is so vast. There will be people that are very, very experienced in one area of payments, say card payments, for example. Or they may be very specific. Maybe they're really specialized in settlement infrastructures or whatever. Or they may be specialized in bank payments, or they may know direct debits extremely well. But they wouldn't have an appreciation of the whole ecosystem and how they all interact together. So I wanted to do so. It was my way of giving back to the industry. Essentially, this is how it all works, but also because there is so much jargon, and in payments we can be very precious about terminology. And sometimes terminology is not helpful because the same term may mean different things depending on context, or one thing may be described in several ways depending on context. So it makes it really, really difficult. So I wanted to completely demystify the whole thing, and I wanted to write it like I speak. So in my tone of voice, no nonsense. If you hear this is what it actually means. And I also drew my own cartoons because I wanted it to be a bit of fun. Yeah. So, authorization, clearing and settlement sounds a bit boring, but if you actually explain it with John and Susie as cartoons, doing a particular interaction, it makes it a bit more palatable. So it's got a lot of pictures as well.
It's nice and accessible then for everyone. And
it is.
Yeah, as you say, you do need someone to cut through the jargon and the complexity, which can act as barriers, of course, to people in the industry.
Absolutely. And it can seem a bit daunting.
Well, we look forward to seeing your fourth book published. It will be on all our reading lists.
Thank you.
And as you mentioned, you frequently do training, you go into financial institutions and organizations and deliver courses and training. So I wonder, what is the question that you get asked the most about payments, and how do you answer it?
The question I get asked the most is, how do you get into it? I want to get into payments. It's the question I get asked the most. I wouldn't say there is any specific question that I get asked the most apart from that one, because they would be very specific. So there are people who are interested in cards and they want to understand how chargebacks work, for example, or they want to understand how 3D Secure works, or they want to understand what the liability shift concept is. So there is no single particular question. I think mostly it is, I want to understand how it works in order to be able to talk to my customers better, to understand the challenges they're actually facing. I'm also quite staggered very, very often that, some people, some very, very senior people and experts in their own areas have a lot of misconceptions about other areas of payments. So, and that's what I wanted to do with my books. It's like, you may be an expert in your area of payments, but you don't know the whole thing. So have a look. This is how it works. And you can draw parallels with what you actually do in your day-to-day job.
Yeah, so bust some of those myths or those misconceptions, I suppose. Well, it gives you a really interesting perspective, I think, both, having written the books you've written so far and also delivering that training, you have this kind of overview, I guess, of the ecosystem. And I'm wondering, what's the one thing that you want more leaders in the payment space to understand? Or maybe it's something that they get wrong quite often or overlook.
So I'll tell you a really interesting story. So I have a young lady that I mentor, and she's getting a new job as a customer success manager for a payments organization. And she wanted to understand, what she should be doing in her job. And she produced this plan. So she did a lot of the legwork, and which was very good. But it was fundamentally missing something. And this is what I found most payment leaders also forget. And that is, what is leading a strategy for a payment organization is actually the customer. What do the customers actually want? And lots of organizations say, we are customer-led. But they're not. They are product-led. So when you have a customer success manager, the clue is in the title. They're actually looking after customers. But in all the plan that this young lady actually produced, it was actually a product plan. And I said to her, look, this is all very commendable, but that is the role of the product manager. And you should really work with them, but your job is customer success manager. So you should flip that and look at the customers. So all too often, what payment leaders forget is that there's the payment stack, there's the payment tech, there's the product, but at the end of the day, it's the customer that is going to use it. And you should actually look at that first. So being customer-led, for me, is mostly the mistake that I see being made.
That's really interesting. I think, as companies look to solve, problems or develop payment solutions that actually get more widely adopted, of course, they have to understand their customers, don't they?
Absolutely.
Well, look, let's get the crystal ball out now. I'll ask you to cast your mind into the future. What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge facing the payment space in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I would say one word, and that's applicable to everything that may or may not happen in the next 10 years. And that one word is trust. And essentially, in order for any kind of payment ecosystem to work, it needs to have trust. You look at the card networks, you trust in that piece of plastic, or that piece of plastic that is lodged in your phone. You trust in it. You know it's going to work. When you're going to use it, it's going to work. You know you're going to be protected. So if we look at any other kind of payment rails, you have to trust them. You trust your bank, you trust your online app, you trust it. Fast forward, agentic AI, maybe I'm going to trust my AI agent to do things for me. Right now, do I trust that agent to do things for me? Not really, because the governance is not really there. The frameworks are not really completely there, although the foundations are being laid out. So I have no doubt in the next 10 years, maybe we won't even be involved, in terms of I want my AI agent to go and manage my investment in the best possible way they can. Right now, would I trust them with my money, especially for large amounts? And no, I wouldn't. But there will be use cases where it would be really, really beneficial to actually do that. And automation is always a great thing, especially in this day in age where everything is so much faster than it has ever been. So for me, trust is the fundamental one word over the next 10 years, is how do we make sure we have trust in any kind of ecosystem and any kind of rail that will happen to be in place for, payment ecosystems as a whole. And that involves agentic AI. This involves stablecoins as alternative settlement rails and so on and so forth.
Well, it's interesting you say that, as it kind of leads on nicely to my next question, which is, what does it take for a payment method to go from being seen as an alternative to becoming mainstream? And I would think trust plays a huge part in that, doesn't it?
Trust actually plays a very, very huge part in it. And as I said earlier on, it's kind of not about the payment facility itself.
Right.
Because the payment facility itself may be brilliant.
Yeah.
Fantastic technology, fantastic everything. It does solve problems, so it has utility and all of the things that it does. But at the end of the day, there are many stakeholders in this value chain. Mm-hmm. What are merchants going to get out of it? Are they going to want to deploy it, and are they incentivized to do so? Are the payment providers themselves incentivized to essentially promote that new payment technology? And are the consumers wanting to use it because it is convenient or it indeed solves a problem? Mm. And again, it comes back to, you have to understand the customers and all the stakeholders, and they all need to derive value or benefit out of that interaction. So you may have brilliant technology, but it's not appealing because, it has no utility for the target market, which perhaps was not very well defined. Mm-hmm. So making sure that everyone has a stake in it for it to be deployed. I mean, look at the deployment of contactless in the UK. Mm. Why did it mushroom? Way before the pandemic is because suddenly we have open loop cards on TfL. Mm. Just sweep out your card or your phone and you pay, and it's very convenient. So suddenly, contactless surged as a payment method. So it has to have utility.
Mm. So do you think it needs that killer use case, or is it more about the method just having that time in the market?
I think it's a combination of all three. Okay. The merchants need to want it. The consumers need to find utility with it, and the other stakeholders, I think the payment providers, the issuers, or whomever the parties are in the ecosystem, need to derive value out of that product or interaction or service. Mm-hmm. So it's all three.
Well, let's talk about open banking, which we touched on in our initial game, approved pending declined. But I want to hear a bit more from you specifically on the rate of adoption of open banking. So where are we? What were your thoughts on the current rate of adoption?
So current rate of adoption, as I'm sure you know, Ellie, is not what it could be in the UK. But I have no doubt this will rise up as soon as we see more deployments, because currently only mandated is sweeping VRPs, as you see, but we have open banking payments. And again, it comes back to the three things I mentioned before. It needs to be convenient for the users to use, because we are a heavily card penetrated market in the UK. Mm-hmm. So undeniably, people are used to contactless, they're used to using their phone and so on and so forth. So if anything is clunkier than that, then of course they're going to opt for convenience. But if there are incentives for using a different thing than what you're used to, and essentially that should come on the merchant side, then they would, especially in the current economic conditions. Mm. So merchant incentive to consumer to use different payment methods, understanding that it potentially could be cheaper than using card payments, the development of appropriate commercial models, the development of an appropriate funding model for the ecosystem so that all stakeholders are actually encouraged to adopt a particular facility, in this case, open banking. If you look at what Visa are doing with, their A2A payments, first deployment, there was an announcement in the last week of doing the first commercial VRP using the Visa A2A rail. Visa know very well what they're doing. They know very well what they're doing. They want to keep people in their ecosystem, and what they're actually saying, you will benefit from the same kind of chargebacks you get on card by using our A2A payments. Yay! If you're a merchant, have a bit of that. And what Visa are doing is essentially they're keeping people in. So having those kind of facility, perhaps outside of traditional networks, and having more and more players that essentially help with the development of commercial models, because that's what is sadly lacking as funding to enable all the kind of things that you used to say on the guardrails, such as the fraud protection, such as chargeback, and things like that, such as incentives. All of these things that you would get as a user, as a card holder, need to be not necessarily the same, but similar, or same kind of incentives in order for people to use it and for merchants to adopt it.
So do you think we'll see in the next sort of 12 months then any kind of movement in terms of adoption?
I have great hopes. I have great hopes in this last quarter of 2025 for the development of suitable economic incentives for all stakeholders, so that this could work. It won't replace what is actually there, but it will sit alongside, I believe, depending on the use cases and what you want to do with them. I'm a great believer of open banking. I believe it gives a genuine alternative to that. Wallets will have a great part to play in this. I'm really excited looking at what's happening in Europe with the European Payments Initiative and Neira. They're getting members like on a daily basis, more or less. So seeing that and seeing how that develops actually is very encouraging, because they've tried that many times before. This one is looking like it's succeeding. And if you overlay on top of that the European digital identity wallet, so they have a combination of things that's starting to look more like what's happening in India. So I'm watching that with great interest. So in the UK, maybe the wallets will suddenly realize this. Maybe the UK government will realize that we need to look at wallets as well in order, for consumer adoption to be there. But I've got great hopes. I'm a firm believer in open banking. It certainly drove innovation, more competition. We need to have the appropriate guardrails, commercial models, and all of that, and the appropriate incentives for all stakeholders for it to work.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier about, having gone into so many organisations to deliver training that, you often hear institutions talk about themselves as being customer led. And we hear a lot, don't we, in payments about how important that customer experience is. What for you are the three key features to creating and delivering that all important user experience?
It's probably a combination of elements. First of all, I'm going back to trust again, because trust is really what you need to have in payments. So if you expand on that theme, I would say perhaps the first thing would be transparency, because people want to know what's happening, and when you look at the data that is held about you, how payments are working, and so on and so forth, you need to know what's happening. So transparency and explainability, and of course this applies to agentic payments and AI and everything else. So knowing what's being done with your stuff, whether you are a person or a business. So transparency is actually key, and customers, whether they be people or indeed organization, and they need to know how much they're paying, why they're paying it, the type of fees associated with it, and everything is lovely when it works, but when it doesn't work, you need to know what happens. So transparency is absolutely key, and that's one element of trust. The second element is control. You need to be in control of what is actually happening. So essentially, we're talking about consent and consent management system, the ability to withdraw at any time, the ability to cancel easily at any time. So control over your own accounts, be they payments account or any kind of financial account, because you need to know when something goes wrong, you're able to do something about it. So having control. So first, transparency, and secondly, control. And the third thing I would say, as far as the customer experience is concerned, I would say consistency.
Ah, okay.
So consistency, because basically, even today, it's a bit disjointed. As a consumer, you want to be able to have the same experience, whether you pay online, at the shop, at the kiosk, using a payment method, and so on and so forth. You don't want it to be a different process all the time. You need to be familiar with what it is you're doing. And consistency also means things like standardization, such as, how you're going to authenticate, for example. So biometrics has been a great driver of consistency. People are used to biometrics now. I mean, if you cast your mind back a decade ago, would you think you'd be able to pay using or authenticate using a fingerprint? No. I mean, Apple did the world a great service when they actually first deployed Touch ID. Now, biometrics is a thing. I mean, we don't even think about it because it's part of life. So consistency essentially breeds confidence. Yeah. And confidence means trust. So all those three elements. So essentially transparency, control, consistency, I think are the key to a great customer experience.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it does, the building block there, the foundation, if you like, is trust, isn't it? And from there you can build on that. Well, look, I'm interested to know what, in the past few years, what you think has been the biggest or most disruptive innovation in payments. And did you see it coming?
What I would have liked to see the biggest disruption in payments, I would have liked to say identity, but of course that is not the case in all markets. Definitely biggest disruptor in India was identity when they deployed that. Now that's a major success story. The India stack is to be praised for what they've actually achieved in that particular geography. So in the past 10 years, what would have been the most disruptive? I would say probably there are many things that were disruptive. We are actually party to that in the UK when the faster payment systems actually launched, way back in 2008. It's like, my God, real-time payments. And I think perhaps that was disruptive. So real-time payments, we were early players, as you know, and at the very beginning in 2008, the limit was £10,000, if you recall. Now the limit is obviously much higher than that. It's £1 million, just to show the success that it has had. And many geographies have followed since, up to the States deploying FedNow in the summer of 2023. So I would say real-time payments perhaps has been the most significant disruptor over the past 10 years. More recently, and you probably expect me to say that because everybody is saying it, what is actually happening with AI? We discussed that briefly at the beginning of this chat, although caveat with that, we're going to need the trust and the governance around it to be able to have things like agentic commerce. And of course, this summer, as well as being the summer of agentic AI, has also been the summer of stable coins. And we talked about hype and demystifying and everything else. There is a lot of misunderstanding as to what the stable coin is and what the CBDC is. And sometimes people actually confuse the two. But stable coins have their use cases in their markets, in their corridors. Definitely useful for, say, those less than optimal corridors for settlement. And indeed, lots of organizations are using that for settlement. I'm not a believer of in stablecoin for retail payments, but for settlement infrastructures, most definitely. And that is already happening where appropriate for the appropriate use cases. So so the two things to watch, definitely agentic AI around the trust and governance side of things, and stablecoin for, treasury settlement in inefficient corridors can also be a market driver.
It's interesting you mentioned, all these different payment methods and currencies that we hear about, whether it's stable coins, CBDCs, we've had cryptocurrency, which some would argue is not a currency, but and then we think about the payment methods that we're familiar with today. In 10 years' time, what or how are we going to be paying for goods and services, do you think? What's going to be the most common mainstream payment method?
Well, I think the card network will still very much be there. We may not be paying with the physical plastic cards, but again, it will depend on culture and geography, because you always have to come back then to the customer and customer preferences. So what individuals actually want to use. Here, you want to use card. I mean, not necessarily the physical form factor, but on your phone and so on and so forth. In other markets, such as Germany, for example, they use A2A payments because that's culture, that's customer preferences, and so on and so forth. In Europe, 10 years' time, maybe euro will be the dominant payment method, throughout the European market. And that will be essentially cross-border across the whole of the EU bloc. So I'm waiting to see what's happening there. So fast forward, will we be paying for stuff? Well, maybe for some use cases, we won't. Maybe the AI will be doing that for us. Maybe the AI will talk to the AI to do the stuff that we're used to doing manually ourselves. So there will be use cases in 10 years' time. Will the card networks have disappeared? No, absolutely not. They'll still very much be there. They will still be playing on all of the rails, as indeed they both do, certainly the dominant ones, Visa and MasterCard. A2A payments will rise for the reason we've explained earlier. And for some part of it, then we'll have AI agents and avatars and such likes.
Well, that's interesting you say that, I think, because it's probably hard to imagine, isn't it, when we try and look so far ahead. It's hard to imagine these things becoming the norm, but actually, as you say, day to day, year by year, we adopt technologies, and actually change is kind of normal for us, as long as it's that consistent experience, I suppose, that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Apple deployed Touch ID way back, you wouldn't think now that, people don't even bat an eyelid at using biometrics. Whereas before it was like, oh, what about fingerprint, privacy, all of these things. I mean, there were lots of people really concerned about this. Now nobody is.
Finally then, let's come back to your role as a sort of educator, speaker and a mentor as well. What's the one piece of advice that you'd give to any payments leaders or payment practitioners who are listening to this episode?
I would say the one thing is keep learning. Because as I say myself, I learn every day. I mean, I produced a white paper on agentic AI in June. And in September, I was actually asked to serialize it into 7 episodes. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So I take my paper, which I wrote in June, to serialize it. And suddenly I realized that in those 3 months, so much has happened that I had to substantially update that paper to add the new development for the September edition before I could actually serialize it. So don't assume that something that was valid 3 months ago is actually valid today. Of course, the fundamentals will remain the same. You always have authorization, clearing, settlement. We know how that actually works. But whatever else you overlay on top of that, new business models, regulations evolve, and so on and so forth. So I would say keep learning and keep up to date.
And of course, that's what makes it such an interesting and vital industry to be part of, right?
Absolutely.
Well, Neira, thank you so much for answering my questions. Great to hear all your thoughts and insights.
Delighted.
So, Neira, now we're going to play our game Higher or Lower. There's been in the past there was a game show that was very similar. So it's a simple concept. I will give you a statistic and then say, do you think the next figure or statistic I give you is going to be higher and lower than that one? So let's start with open banking versus contactless payments volume. So it took contactless payments 6 years to reach an annual transaction value of £1 billion, which was brought on in large part by its introduction to London buses and the TfL network. Of course, you mentioned that earlier. Is that faster or slower than open banking payments took to hit the 1 billion transaction value mark?
Faster.
Why do you think it's faster?
Because contactless payment had real utility.
Interesting. I probably would have said the same, but actually it's slower by 1 year. So data from pay.uk suggests that 2022 was the first year where the total value of open banking payments surpassed the 1 billion mark. That's 5 years after the initiative was introduced.
That's interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I would not have expected that either. Okay, let's look at monthly PIX versus open banking payments volume. So PIX, which is obviously Brazil's instant payment scheme, that launched in November 2020, and it's seen phenomenal growth, hasn't it? So it really has. So by December 2024, PIX processed over 6 billion transactions monthly. Is that higher or lower than the monthly payment volume for contactless transactions in the UK?
Higher.
And why do you say that?
Because there was a real push by the Brazilian government for usage of PIX and deployments. And as far as consumers, they're now really, really used to it. Mm-hmm. So and it has real convenience. So that's why I think it is. I'm probably wrong.
You are right. It is higher. It is higher. So monthly contactless payments totaled 1.59 billion in March 2023. So yeah, you're obviously that approach they adopted in Brazil is obviously worked.
It has.
Okay, so let's look at card processing versus card fraud. Now, worldwide card payment fraud losses reached approximately $33.83 billion in 2023. Is that higher or lower than the card processing fees paid by US businesses alone in 2023?
Higher.
And why do you say that?
Well, I would be surprised that the amount of fraud globally would actually be lower than one geography alone in terms of processing fees.
Well, it's much lower. US businesses paid over $172 billion in card processing in 2023.
Oh, that is interesting. So, okay.
Yeah.
That is very, very interesting, and probably to do with that favorite concept of ours in the US. Obviously, the figure would not be the same in Europe.
No, exactly. Very much, a US thing there. In fact, that's actually an all-time high. And as you know, as we say, it highlights the substantial cost, doesn't it, in the US of accepting card payments for merchants. Well, that was a great round. 1 out of 3 right, so not too bad, Neira. Thank you for playing that round of higher or lower.
You're very welcome. That was fun.
Okay, so the final section of the podcast, Neira, I'm going to ask you for your most controversial take on payments or the payments industry, and then I'm going to tell you whether I agree or not. So what is your hot take?
Okay, well, given what we've just been discussing, so here's my hot take. Interchange works.
Okay, do you want to explain a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So interchange, as we know, is the funding mechanism on the card networks. It helps fund the ecosystem. It helps fund the fraud prevention mechanism and all the processes that we actually have around it. As a concept, as an economic funding mechanism for an ecosystem, it does work. This is why you can do the types of things you do on the card network. This is why when fraud is committed on your card, you can go back to your issuer and say there was fraud and you won't lose any money through the chargeback process and so on and so forth. So interchange works. Is it perfect? By no means it's not. Is it abused? Yes, it can be abused and often is. Is it applied fairly? Not always. Can it be opaque? Yes, absolutely. But as a concept, interchange works. This is what has enabled the card networks to be what they are today and to fund innovation, fraud prevention, and the trust that people have in those ecosystems. So if you look at card networks such as Visa and MasterCard, they operate worldwide, globally. And now we're talking, and we talked earlier about open banking, and we're saying, well, why is it so slow in terms of deployment and so on and so forth? You haven't got the equivalent of interchange. I'm not saying replicate interchange. I'm saying replicate a funding mechanism that actually works for that ecosystem, so that all the ecosystem stakeholders derive value from that particular ecosystem, which is indeed what the UK government is doing in this last quarter, as we've discussed earlier on. So I know, depending on which side of the fence you actually sit, you either love or hate interchange, but as a concept, it actually works. This is what has enabled those organizations to be successful. And it's being debated. It's been a very litigious and contentious matter for many, many years, certainly since I have been in payments and Visa and MasterCard, scrutinized by the regulators, lots of litigation and lawsuits all over the place. But at the end of the day, it works. Eliminating interchange will actually make that ecosystem collapse. So it's a matter of understanding what that does, how it could be applied fairly. And indeed, this is being reviewed in many geographies, but as a funding mechanism, as an economic means of making an ecosystem work, it works.
Well, it's hard to argue with that. And as you say, this is what's needed, with open banking payments, right? And that's kind of what the industry is trying to get its head around, I suppose. Maybe a version of that interchange system anyway, even if it's not the same kind of thing. But I do see your point there around, okay, if you accept it's by no means perfect, yes, you can see how it's benefited and how it's worked in consumers' favour. And as you say, it is a model that if we didn't have it, I guess the ecosystem wouldn't be there.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, Neira, for that hot take, but also for all of your opinions, your views. It's fascinating to hear about your own experience in this industry. And look, I'm really excited for your fourth book. If it's anything like your previous three and this conversation that we've had, then it'll be really enlightening.
Thank you so much, Ellie. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad we were able to discuss and ask some questions that perhaps were a bit controversial, and maybe also bust some myths and give people something to think about.
Absolutely. My thanks again to Neira for coming on to Settling Up with Go Cardless to settle things. And thank you very much for watching and listening, of course. You can look out for all new episodes, both on Spotify and YouTube. Until next time, I hope that settles things.